You didn't lose her. You lost the version of yourself that she could love. It's 2 a.m., and you're staring at the ceiling, replaying her messages in your head. You're scrolling through old texts, trying to pinpoint the exact moment the energy shifted. Did you say something wrong? Did you not say enough? You're searching for a reason that makes sense, because the alternative that she just stopped feeling it is too heavy to carry right now. So you blame yourself. You replay the moments you were emotionally present, completely unaware that she was already preparing for something else. You convinced yourself that the distance was just a phase, that she was busy, that she was stressed, that she just needed space. You gave her that space. You compromised your own boundaries just to keep the peace, pouring your energy into making sure she never felt pressured. And for a while, you actually believed it was working. You thought that if you just loved her hard enough, stayed patient enough, she would finally see it and meet you halfway. That's the part that keeps you awake. The illusion of potential. The idea that while you were guarding the relationship, she was already quietly packing her bags. You were loyal to a version of her that didn't exist anymore, holding on to promises that had already expired. But effort isn't a currency. You can't buy someone's readiness by overextending your own heart. You can't love someone into choosing you. And now, the quiet in your room is so heavy it actually physically hurts. Not just because she's gone, but because you realize you're the only one left holding the entire history of what you built, completely alone. That history becomes heavy when you're the only one carrying it. You wake up the next morning and the first 10 seconds are fine. You forget it happened. And then the reality crashes into your chest all over again. You start carrying this invisible weight through your entire day. You show up where you need to be, you smile at the right times, you laugh when you're supposed to. But underneath all of that, you are just so deeply exhausted. It's not a physical tired, it's the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. You're tired from the mental gymnastics of trying to figure out where you went wrong. You're exhausted from replaying the same memories, trying to spot the exact second her eyes changed, the exact moment her text messages went from paragraphs to one-word replies. You spend hours analyzing the shift, convincing yourself that if you can just understand it, maybe it won't hurt as much. But understanding doesn't stop the bleeding. It just gives you a clearer view of the wound. So you withdraw. You don't tell your friends how bad it really is, because you don't want to be the person who can't let go. You don't want to hear another speech about how time heals everything or how you dodged a bullet, because it doesn't feel like you dodged anything. It feels like you took the hit directly to the chest, and now you're expected to just walk it off. You start to isolate. You shrink your world down to just your room, your thoughts, and a phone that refuses to light up with her name. You sit in that silence, and you let it convince you that you are the problem. You let the quiet tell you that if you had just been a little more exciting, a little more patient, a little more guarded, she would have stayed. You gave everything you had to someone who was already halfway out the door, and the only thing you got in return was an empty tank. You poured your entire capacity into someone else's cup, only to realize there was a hole in the bottom. And now, you're just sitting there completely drained, wondering how long you can survive on fumes. Because eventually, the sadness stops being loud. It stops being tears and panic. It just becomes this quiet, dull ache that sits right behind your ribs. But right at the bottom of that ache, right when you think you have nothing left to give, that's when the exhaustion finally forces you to open your eyes. When you finally open your eyes, the room doesn't look any different. The walls are the same, the ceiling is the same, but something inside your chest has shifted. You stop asking why she left, and for the first time, you start asking why you fought so desperately to make her stay. It's a quiet realization. It doesn't hit you like a wave. It creeps in like a slow chill when you're staring at that empty chat screen. You scroll up, and suddenly the pattern is so obvious it's almost embarrassing. You were the one carrying the conversations. You were the one initiating the plans. You were the one closing the emotional gap every single time she let herself drift. You weren't in a partnership. You were in a state of constant maintenance. You were single-handedly sustaining a connection with someone who was perfectly comfortable letting it fade. And that's when the exhaustion stops being sad and starts turning into clarity. It's not a loud, destructive anger, but a cold, undeniable truth that you can no longer unsee. You start looking at the red flags you painted green just to keep the peace. You realize that her pulling away wasn't a sudden mistake. It wasn't bad timing. It wasn't that she was just busy or figuring things out. It was a choice. She actively chose to let the distance grow. She chose to withhold her effort. She chose to be okay with the possibility of losing you. And that's the realization that completely shatters the illusion. You were mourning the loss of someone you thought was terrified of losing you. But in reality, you were losing someone who was already entirely fine without you. You were offering top-tier loyalty to someone who was treating you like a convenient option. You were trying to love someone into loving you back, and you finally understand that love doesn't work as a transaction. You can't out-effort someone's lack of interest. You didn't lose your person, you lost an imbalance. You lost a dynamic that was slowly draining the life out of you. You finally see that the relationship ending wasn't a failure, it was a rescue. But here is the trickiest part of human nature. Even when you know all of this, even when the logic perfectly aligns and your eyes are wide open to the truth, the absence still leaves a massive hole in your daily routine. Because knowing someone wasn't good for you doesn't magically make the empty space beside you disappear. That empty space is brutally loud. You wake up, and before your brain even fully turns on, your hand instinctively reaches for the phone. You're waiting for a notification that isn't coming. It's the routine that haunts you more than the actual person. It's the inside jokes that suddenly have nowhere to land. The things that happen during your day that you instinctively want to tell her about, before remembering you can't anymore. I know how it feels. Your mind starts playing tricks on you. It goes into survival mode, filtering out all the disrespect, the anxiety, the sheer exhaustion you felt at the end. It conveniently forgets the nights you felt entirely alone while she was still in your life. Instead, it puts the highlight reel on repeat. The way she laughed when things were good. The nights you stayed up talking until 4 a.m. when the connection actually felt real. And for a split second, your loneliness tries to overpower your logic. Your thumb hovers over her name in your contacts. You tell yourself just one text, just to see how she is, just to break this unbearable silence. You try to convince yourself that maybe she misses you too, that maybe the distance made her realize what she lost. But that is just the withdrawal talking. It's not love pulling you backward. It's an addiction to the familiar. When your nervous system gets so used to emotional inconsistency, peace feels terrifying. Calmness feels like a void. You start confusing the ache of a healing wound with the urge to rip it open again just to feel something you recognize. But going back to what broke you will never put you back together. If you reach out, you might get a few hours of relief. You might get a temporary hit of validation from a half-hearted reply. But tomorrow, you will wake up right back in the exact same miserable spot. Only this time, you'll have less respect for yourself, so you have to put the phone down. You have to force yourself to sit in the quiet. And man, it is agonizing. You grieve. But you aren't just grieving her anymore. You are grieving the time you spent. You are grieving the effort you wasted. You are mourning the version of the future you had already meticulously mapped out in your head. You finally accept that you're crying over a ghosted idea of a person who never actually existed the way you needed them to. It's a bitter pill to swallow, realizing you handed over so much of your present to someone who never intended to stay for your future. You sit in that quiet room, completely stripped of the illusions, feeling the full, crushing weight of letting go. But right there, when the noise finally dies down and the urge to chase her completely burns out, something else begins to take root. What takes root isn't happiness right away. It's quiet. For the first time in months, your chest doesn't feel like it's constantly vibrating with anxiety. You don't wake up bracing yourself for a disappointment. You just wake up. It happens slowly, almost without you noticing. One day, you get out of bed, and she isn't your very first thought. You make your coffee, you go about your routine, you live your life, and it isn't until the late afternoon that you realize you haven't checked to see if she viewed your story. You haven't looked for her name, you haven't tried to decode a memory. That's when you finally feel the shift. You realize that all that immense, exhausting energy you were pouring into trying to keep her around is finally yours again. You aren't bleeding out emotionally anymore. The tank is starting to refill, and for the first time in a long time, you get to pour that effort back into the one person who isn't going to walk away from it. You. You start to see the quiet strength in walking away. You realize that letting go wasn't a failure, it was the ultimate act of self-respect. You stopped negotiating your worth with someone who kept undervaluing it. You stopped accepting the bare minimum and calling it progress. You looked at a situation that was breaking you, and you finally decided that you deserve better than someone who is perfectly okay with losing you. You don't even hate her. You don't harbor this loud, venomous resentment anymore. You just understand the truth now. You cannot love someone into loving you back. You cannot build a home inside a heart that keeps changing the locks. And trying to do so doesn't make you a hopeless romantic, It makes you a casualty to someone else's indecision, and you were officially done shrinking yourself just to fit into her temporary spaces. You are going to be okay. Not just okay, you are going to be solid. Because the kind of love you are trying to give her, that depth, that fierce loyalty, that willingness to stay and fight when things got hard, that belongs to you. It proves exactly what you are capable of offering. And one day you are going to hand that exact same love to someone who actually knows how to hold it. Someone who meets you halfway. But until then, you hold it for yourself. You embrace the solitude. You sit in the peace you fought so incredibly hard to earn, realizing that the quiet you feel right now is infinitely better than the anxiety you felt when you were holding on to her. You let the silence be a comfort, not a punishment. The chase is over. The endless waiting is done. You walked through the fire, you carried the weight, and you finally put it down. You didn't lose her. You found yourself.